Police report, York Constabulary, 9th of March, 1984. Incident summary. Disturbance at a private residence on Walmgate, York. It was a freezing March night when the report came in. A distress call from a woman named Margaret Harper. The officer on duty, P.C. Jameson, arrived at the home, expecting a routine welfare check. Instead, he found Margaret in an agitated state, refusing to re-enter her own house. She clutched her coat tightly around her shoulders, her eyes darting toward the open door as if something was watching. "Please," she whispered to Jameson, trembling. "Don't go inside alone. You'll see her too." Her voice was barely a murmur as she explained that she had seen something. A figure in her sitting room. A woman with hollow eyes, dressed in dark, old-fashioned clothing. Her skin pale as moonlight. Margaret claimed she'd woken to find the figure standing by the hearth, whispering to the shadows on the wall. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, but the figure seemed to notice her and turned to watch her silent and unmoving. Margaret fled, and the figure, she swore, followed her with eyes that seemed to sink back into the shadowy void. Jameson, skeptical but sympathetic, convinced her to wait outside while he investigated. He told himself it was just the woman's imagination, a product of a bad dream. But as he stepped inside, he felt a strange pressure in the air, and the most unnatural stillness. There was no sound, not even the faint creaks of the house settling. He moved through the narrow hallway, the beam from his flashlight dancing across the faded wallpaper. The house was still, though a faint chill seemed to cling to the air, colder than it should have been. A police report notes his observation of a strange disturbance, but provides little detail. Only those who were there knew what he saw. When he reached the sitting room, Jameson later confided he saw what Margaret had described. The figure of a woman stood near the fireplace. She looked almost solid, her form sharp and unmoving in the dimness. She wore a long, dark gown that seemed as though it belonged to another century. Her eyes, he described later, were dark and empty, as though they'd been hollowed out. She didn't move, didn't speak, but as he shone his light on her, the air seemed to tighten around him, like he was being drawn into the room, held there against his will. He felt the sharp urge to run, but he couldn't look away from her face. The woman's mouth opened as if she was trying to say something, but no sound came. With his hands shaking, he managed to radio for backup, and in a moment of desperation, he broke his own gaze and bolted for the front door. Police record, interview transcript, Margaret Harper, 11th of March 1984. "Mrs. Harper, you mentioned the name Anne during your statement. Can you explain who Anne was?" "She was my grandmother's sister. She lived in this house long ago. Died here too. They said she was mad, that she'd taken her own life by the fire, but my grandmother always said it wasn't her choice. She thought Anne was drawn in somehow by something in the house." In the days that followed, the officers who responded to Margaret's call struggled to make sense of what they'd seen and felt that night. Rumours began to circulate among the force that the old house on Walmgate was haunted, and some officers refused to set foot in it. A few curious about the rumours began researching the history of the property, looking through archives of old records. According to property records dating back to the early 1900s, the house on Walmgate had once been the home of Anne Marshall, a young woman who had lived and died there. Anne had been known in the neighbourhood as a quiet, unassuming woman, though neighbours claimed she often spoke to herself, whispering to unseen figures late at night. Historical document, Property record: York Minster Archives, 1903. Property description: two-story brick home. Occupants: Anne Marshall, reported deceased. Cause of death: suicide by fire. Neighbours noted peculiar sounds from within, strange mutterings and sightings of figures even after her death. A full investigation was conducted by York's Historical Society, but no logical explanation could be given for the sightings. The final report was simple but chilling. The disturbances experienced by multiple witnesses cannot be explained by natural means. Margaret Harper never returned to live in the house on Walmgate. To this day, locals claim that if you pass the old home on certain misty nights, you can catch a glimpse of the shadow woman standing by the window, watching the street below with empty, waiting eyes. They say she remains there, bound to the house, forever searching for someone to hear her final words. Even now, the locals warn visitors to keep their distance from the old house on Walmgate. The house, while beautiful by day, turns chilling by night. A place where Anne Marshall's shadow waits, whispering, searching for peace that the walls seem unwilling to grant.